Hi, welcome to Waiter Nation. My name is Michael Fagan. I'm your host today. Have Josh Ziegler on a special day. He's here on Monday. He'll be back on Wednesday. It was a good weekend for me. I didn't see any politics. I kept the news off. I really didn't worry about a lot of things. I am worried about the 600, although I didn't want to ruin the weekend. So we have Josh and Mark from Georgia, totally different from my state, New Jersey, and we're going to get into everything. So I hope that you comment in. It makes it more fun. We'll get into 600. We'll get into school districts. Josh's school district is crippled with employees infected with COVID.
Yeah, I wake up to see a headline this morning. I just, click on my CNN. I read all the major headlines, see if there's anything worth reading. And sure enough, I see 260 faculty test positive for COVID in one school district. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then wait a minute, that's my school district. It's in Gwinnett. I see an NFL coach tested positive, Philadelphia Eagles.
Our
Doug
coach.
Peterson.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's hitting closer to home for both you and I. Also read, hey, there's no plan from the federal government. Numbers are getting worse every day. So where are we going? These uplifting headlines, I'm not sure. I've been dying to bring in my buddy Mark on the show for a while now. Mark has a background in finance. He actually left the finance industry to come into our industry. So I'd love to hear his perspective on a few things. So welcome in, Mark. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I mean, all things withstanding, I guess I say I'm great. Definitely a weird time, but It's good to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on, Mark.
What made you get out of finance and into restaurants?
It's a multi-tiered question, but I didn't like who I was and what the industry produces out of people. You become very insulated to the effects of your work, is a way to put it. You start looking for crises because you can benefit from it financially, personally, and for your company. And you start to feel like soulless is a good way to put it. You start looking at, there's a regional skirmish in this tiny little part of the world. How can we benefit from that? And then at the end of the day, you back up and you go, whoa. I just got excited because people are dying.
Right.
And it was tough for me. Some people can do that. They can compartmentalize it. They can go home, look themselves in the mirror. I did a good job today. I made my company a lot of money, and good for them, because we need those people. I'm just not one of them. So I couldn't do it.
So when I hear the NASDAQ setting another record, and when I see the Dow Jones just a couple percentage points off its all-time high during this crisis, 30 million people out of work, everybody I know has no insurance and no prospect of going back to work for months. It makes me frustrated, and I feel like I'm not a part when they say the economy is still great. And I think, well, what about me and all my peers in my industry?
And that's a great point. And one of the things that we have to talk about as economic indicators, right? The stock market has not been an economic indicator for the health of this country's economy, or really any country's economy, since essentially the 1960s or 1970s, when we completely divested from any kind of standard or backing of our financial system.
Mm-hmm.
What the stock market is a health metric for is how those with capital are doing. So if you have a lot of liquid capital, crises are actually good for you, and you're going to see a tick up in the value of companies that can take advantage of it. The best example would be someone big enough to buy, for a you and I example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Housing prices crash. If I have enough capital, enough liquid money, I have $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 cash. Right now, home prices in my area are somewhere in the range of $400,000 to $700,000 for an average family home. Okay. If I have an extra $700,000 liquid cash, and all of a sudden those prices slash in half, I can go buy up 3 houses around me. And when it comes back up, I do really well.
Mm-hmm.
That, in effect, is what the stock market is. It is, what does it cost to gain market share? It's very good for large companies for crises to happen. But the stock market basically measures how healthy they are.
Right.
or how healthy
but
the
terrible for the
wealthy are.
populace of a country.
The metric there that you need to pay attention to are more things like gross domestic product. And we just saw the largest dip in GDP over a quarterly period in essentially the history of that being tracked. Gross domestic product is a metric that literally measures the economic output of an economy, how much money your economy creates
And that's
in any given period.
That's a direct reflection of taking 30 million people out of the working force.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And it's also just lowered production. You look at, and there are so many different industries that are hurt. Everything from, and we know in our industry, in food service, we've seen supply chain issues because of meat packing plants being shut down and all of these things. You multiply that times the workforce that's out of work, all across, and our GDP has gone down by 33% in a quarter. Gross domestic product is really the indicator of how healthy an economy is. And when you really want to look at a fascinating statistic or metric, look at debt versus gross domestic product. United States, since the financial crisis of 2008, has actually been in a pretty good position with our debt to GDP. Most of it was due to things like quantitative easing and the fact that we actually recapitalized our banks after the financial crisis, which a lot of the world didn't recapitalize their banks. They didn't offset their asset sheets, right? They took that money and just dumped it into helping people pay off their loans, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that approach. But the U.S. took the approach of, we're going to pay off the debt that the banks have, because in the long run, that will provide more liquidity, more small business loans will be out there. It'll be easier to get home loans and all of those things, car loans. And we've seen our economy rebound because of it over the last decade.
So let me ask you a question. I would think that a lot of people, just the average watcher, says, well, naturally the GDP is a ridiculous number. We closed down the entire country for 4 months. That was to be expected.
Correct.
By the end of the year, by next year, do these numbers rebound fairly quick by just turning on the switch and saying, now we're open, GDP will be back up, or is this a long lasting effect?
I think this is a longer term effect than people are going to be willing to admit right now. You're going to see it come up. Okay. You're going to see a rise, but it spiked down.
Right.
And you're going to see a very slow tick back up. And for a number of reasons. Number one, think about the number of mortgages that are on some type of deferment plan right now, or some type of easement. And I'm talking business loan, business mortgages, as well as personal private home mortgages. You think about how many of those people, even when the economy starts to open back up everywhere, if they don't have work to go back to, the government cannot keep supporting people forever and ever. Amen. We're already seeing the debate in Congress about lowering the additional. The supplemental is already gone for the moment. You're going to have some very real problems when people try to go back to work. These deferments start coming due. You're going to see ripple effects for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, something in that range, where it's going to take that long before we even see the long-term effect of the downward spike.
Right.
People out of work aren't just, boom, going to come back to work. And if they do come back to work, there's no guarantee they're going to make what they made pre-pandemic.
Exactly, especially in our industry. We're not going back to pre-COVID. Josh, we talk all the time about real estate, about foreclosures, about evictions, and then about the changing business model that finds out that keeping so many people at home might be beneficial. They don't have to rent out the big office buildings, right?
This was definitely a topic I wanted to bring up today. And that is, the pandemic, I think, has totally accelerated changes that I think were probably going to come anyway, but now they're coming at us at hyper speed. And one of the things we have to think about, and Mark, I know you did it for a while. You did a lot of to-go business for the first few months of quarantine. And how many people are going to realize, wow, this is easy. I get the same quality of meal, the cleanups, not like I'm cooking at home. Maybe bring out a couple, plates and that's it. And I'm saving money on, tipping and whatnot. And I'm still getting the experience, and what's that going to mean in the future? Like, how much of our demand for people wanting to come into our restaurant, sit down and dine, you know, we're going to lose 10% for people to just be like, hey, let's just, you know, take it out.
Right.
Let's just do takeout.
And Josh and I have talked about this, and we talked a decent amount about how much are to go, because we shifted to goes early March, and when we ramped up highly, our heaviest to go sales month was in the 40,000.
Right.
And that amount has obviously dropped since we've reopened our dining room, but we're still seeing a regular $10,000 to $15,000 a week in to go business,
which is much higher than pre-COVID.
Oh my! They're not even comparable.
Okay.
We might have done $100 to $300 in to goes a day before. Now we're doing $1,000 to $1,500. Some days $2,500 in to go service.
Right.
We're a French bistro, and some of our food translates very well to go service. Some of it really doesn't. And we're an experience restaurant. We are 100% an experience restaurant. So we were a little surprised to see that amount continue since we've reopened. But I think that the other thing, to go back to the point of where we're going to be as far as business, I think our concept, I'm very lucky where I am. We can tailor and we can adapt and we can do some things and get super lean. What I worry for are the concepts like where Josh is coming from, the steakhouse, that old school model of business travel, corporate accounts, heavier food, things that they don't translate well to go. Mm-hmm. You can't really do it in a socially distanced way. The big bars, those places, to me, those are gonna, and until there's a vaccine, those are gonna struggle. And
it's why we haven't opened. It's why we haven't opened. Yeah, I mean, we rely 100%. So much on business travel. I absolutely agree. But I'm actually, you know, again, scared. We know, like, in terms of corporate business, that a lot of people are working from home, and certain businesses are realizing, you know what, we're just as productive and our costs are way down. Mm-hmm. Yep. We're not bringing people into an office. We don't need the office. And I know a good friend of mine, same thing. He sells, credit card machines, that service. And they were told, hey, we're just doing away with the office. We don't need it anymore.
And so you're going to see corporate real estate tank.
Exactly.
Right. Maybe two administrators will be in an office just to email to keep in contact with everybody else. But instead of having a floor, you might rent one office or two offices.
And like I said, the world was going in this direction anyway, but we might have been 10 years away from it. Whereas now I think people are just realizing it that much sooner. You accelerate the process.
What you'll see is a rise in the number of these WeWork places, the number 18s for the really high end, so that when you have to have a meeting with a client, you come in, you go to a nice place, there's a receptionist, there's this, there's that, there's coffee, there's even food service, but then there's a boardroom. But you rent that space along with it. It's not one company renting a floor, to your point, Michael. It's you rent an office with an option to use the boardroom on a schedule. Right. But you don't work. You're not in a building with the people you work with.
Right.
And you might use that space once a week. So, yeah, we're going to see, there will still be a demand for, there's a thing called third spaces in work environments, something that's not home and that's not work. The coffee shop is the classic third space, right? There's always going to be a demand for some type of third space. But that workspace and home space are going to merge way more than they ever did before. And you're going to see corporate real estate just.
Right. And that's going to have an effect, another residual effect on our industry.
Well, it's 100%. It's an interesting take that the leaser or the building owner, what they're probably already thinking of is what you just said. We're going to start leasing per day rather than per month, per hour. We're going to book. We have a schedule, 3 hours on Monday, 3 hours on Tuesday, right? All the way through. The other thing that will come into this is retail is going to drastically go out of business as far as malls and retail stores quicker. So that lends to a lot more real estate available. And what do you do with all these empty buildings? Because it was coming, like you said, Josh, but this closed just, everybody learned how to use Amazon, even old people that, like to go to their Boscov stores, they're using Amazon, and it just changes everybody's habits. And once you get into a habit, it's hard to go back. Right.
So why don't we segue into going into the next relief package, because this is obviously on our minds a lot. Mark, we talked yesterday, and for the first time, a little background on Mark. He's, let's just say he's against a large government imprint on society.
Okay. Good way to put it,
yeah. Anyway, you told me like you were all for the $600 federal.
Yeah, and actually, I think Josh was surprised to hear me say that yesterday. This is one of the few times in my life, and I've said it multiple times. I'm 37 years old, to give you context, that I have seen government operate quickly in this country to solve a problem, a very real problem. And the fact that the first round of stimulus money and the enhanced unemployment was voted on and enacted as quickly as it was I sat back and said, you know what? This is an example of it working. Doing the right thing in the moment to keep people from losing homes, losing health care, being able to put food on the table, all of those things. And it was a really positive thing. Now, that being said, eventually we're going to have to stop. It's borrowing against future GDP. We go back to GDP, right? Anytime you do something like that as a big economic concept, what you are doing is you're borrowing against future production. And we throw around these numbers, these trillions of dollars, and you are doing two things in that moment. You're borrowing against the value that's already in circulation. So the second that was signed, every dollar that was in circulation went down in value, because you're literally creating value out of nothing. So the only way to do that is to strip value out of what's already in circulation, out of the money supply. So inherently, you've created inflation. In the long-term effect of that is negative. And even in keeping with that, even in knowing that, it was the right thing to do. If you are going to exist in the economic climate that we do, using the style of economics that we use, neo-Keynesian economics, fractional reserve banking and all of that, this was the play. It keeps the engine moving. It just makes it less efficient further down the line.
So I did see something, and I was talking about it with Josh, about the Fed chairman of Minneapolis. And he was saying that personal savings has jumped. Normally it's about 5-6%. It's up over 20% right now. And his explanation was that people are lucky enough to be working. They don't have all the choices. They're not going on vacation. They're not going out to dinner. They're not spending. So they have another 10-15% a month to put in a savings account. And he said, so the banks will have so much money, the $600 makes sense. This is a little bit above my pay grade, how this all balances out. It seemed to make sense, but I don't know the argument against it, so I don't know if it makes sense.
So it does make sense.
Right.
And I've seen on a person, here's the problem, and here's what he's doing, is he's playing two games, right? He's taking anecdotal evidence. My household has more money,
right?
And it does. We've seen the same thing in my personal household, right? We aren't going out. We're spending a lot less. We're not traveling. We had to cancel some what were going to be expensive trips. And so, yes, at a personal level, we have more money in savings, okay? But then he's mixing it. He's taking apples and oranges. And the issue with that is where that money came from is the money that was already in circulation. So that 20% bump or 15% or whatever he's talking about isn't really worth the dollar amount in spending power that it seems like it's worth. Eventually, we are going to see prices increase because the cost of goods and services will go up because the value, the buying power of the dollar has gone down. So even though you have, let's say, $10,000 in savings now and you only had $4,000 before, your $10,000 only buys you $6,000.
Right.
So and the argument about banks having more money, look, banks don't need money. banks use a system called fractional reserve banking, which means they can loan out 90%, some of them up to 95% of everything that gets deposited into their bank. So I write a check for $1,000 and I give it to Josh, and Josh puts it in Bank of America. Bank of America could write out a $9,000 check on that, and that gets deposited by another person who banks Bank of America, and they can write up to $8,300 and ad nauseum and ad nauseum and ad nauseum off of the first original $1,000. They don't need the money. That's such a misnomer. It's a debt economy, and it's a debt economy that is ad infinitum. As soon as someone deposits money into a bank account, that becomes both an asset and a liability on the banking sheet. So it's a really, really mixed. He's playing with people's ignorance by saying things like that, and he knows it. And the reality is that's fine. I mean, it's fine to say stuff like that as long as he really understands the machinations of what's going on and how to handle it. Because honestly, it's not his job to do PR. It's not his job to explain that to the masses. It's his job to keep his section of the economy running well. Now, here's what's frightening to me. In all of this, we haven't talked about the prime rate. And one of the first things that happened when we went into this coronavirus recession is they redropped the prime rate to effectively zero. And the reason that that's frightening is because rate drops, rate dips are the buffer in an economy. So if you have a 5% prime rate, means most people are borrowing at somewhere around like 8 or 9%, right? Well, the economy slows down. You lower that prime rate to say 2.5%. Now it only costs you 5% to borrow. You've increased liquidity because the cost of borrowing money has gone down, right? It literally costs you less to get a mortgage, buy a car, open a business, all of those things. We're at zero. There's nowhere else to go. And we've been effectively at zero since 2008.
Right.
We started just recently in the last 18 months to tick up to give ourselves a buffer, and then immediately had to use the little bit of buffer we had left. It's really a frightening scenario. And what scares me the most isn't coronavirus anymore. We know what that's going to be. It's if the next shoe falls anywhere in the economy, there's nothing else to fix it with. So all of a sudden,
throwing all our eggs into this one basket.
Correct. And, if there is another housing crisis, if there is another .com crash, if there is another anything, we're done.
You bet. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, man.
So let's talk about the 600 going forward, because my feeling is this, and we spoke last week about it, and I said I understand where the anger's coming from. For people that were making $350 a week are now getting $850 a week. And I get that. And I get that it does disincentivize certain people from going back to work. I can understand all that. But my feeling is this, is that I really believe, and I believe this, that we will have a vaccination for this come later this year, maybe at the latest early next year. And my thing is, what's the harm in getting us there in a very, very, very healthy way, individually, where, you know, maybe not the overall economy, but individuals would be healthy. And that's my argument for continuing it.
Right, because if you're not going to help, if you go to the extreme and you say there is no additional federal assistance with the unemployment,
or just say the 200,
still a catastrophe, because there are 10 million people that were making more, you and I, before we collected unemployment.
Us included, yeah.
You know, so 2/3 are making more right now and they're loving life, but they're a third of the people, which is like 10, 12 million people, are not, and you can't save, you can't spend, so our money is not spending. It would be catastrophic. I wonder about people, let's say they have their lease is coming up October 1st. And they have to sign a new lease. They don't have a job. They're on furlough. There's no promise of a job.
Good chance they don't pay September's rent, so they probably can't, stay where they are.
Does the leasing company or whoever owns the property, do they say, "Oh yeah, you're fine. We'll just take a risk on you. We know you'll go back to work," or will they say, "Well, you don't qualify to sign a new lease with us"?
And again, my thing is, look, it'd be one thing if this was going to go on indefinitely. And we didn't know, and we don't know, but we weren't even sure that there was no hopes for a vaccination and that this could get worse by November as opposed to better. You know, I get the argument, look, we got to think more long-term here. But now I think that we could keep a short-term goal in sight. And that's, again, my reason why I think they'll you know, come close to the 600 if they don't, you know, outright say, yeah, okay, you can have the 600 again. But I know, Mark, you feel like it shouldn't quite be 600 this time.
Well, I don't know. And I feel like, well, I don't know what I feel like it should be. I think should is an interesting word. I don't think it will be 600. The number that I think is 450. I think you're going to land at 450 additional, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Should is a whole other conversation.
Right.
I actually, and to Josh's credit, and one of the reasons Josh and I get along so well is he thinks things through. To his credit, his point about when the vaccine comes out, when that happens, don't you want everybody in firm financial footing so that we can just be back, right? People can go out to eat. People can buy property. They re-sign their leases. They do all of the things that a healthy economy does, which is a really strong point. And that has altered some of my thinking, to his credit. What I do think is going to happen, and Josh also brought up the fact that we're in an election year.
Right.
And these people who are up for re-election are going to want to vote for the people, or for things that are going to make people vote for them to get back in office, which tends to lead to we're going to end up with a higher number. So I don't think the 300 is going to happen. I don't necessarily think the 600 is going to happen. What I can speak to is the effect it has had in our industry. And so I'm the GM of a restaurant that is frankly doing quite well right now. We reopened on May 4th, and we are very lucky and doing very well. But I know a lot of people whose businesses aren't. And so their people aren't making a lot of money, even those who have come back. And it has made it very hard to get people to come back. So on my end, I'm actually very lucky because people can come back and they can work 4 to 5 shifts and make more than they were making on unemployment for the most part. Not every job, not every position. We all know how the industry works.
Do you have capacity limitations? Are you at 20 or 40%, or are
so we do not anymore, but we as a business have a self-imposed limitation.
Okay.
We still don't have our bar open in our restaurant. We are self-limiting parties to 8 or more. We still are distanced in our dining room. I'm sorry, 8 or less. Thank you. We are still distancing in our dining room. Now, where we've been very lucky is that the landlord for our complex has allowed us to expand our exterior patio seating. So we, in effect, only lost 10 total seats.
Okay.
So we've expanded out onto what used to be a drive lane right out in front of our restaurant. And we have an additional 15 tables that we otherwise wouldn't have had. So
in New Jersey, there is no indoor dining yet. Right. And it's only patio dining and takeout. And I know a lot of people to say that they're not going back to work. We're making, let's just say, $1,000 a week. And now they're making minimum job doing takeouts and just packing bags. They used to walk home with $200 a day. Now they're walking home with, $15 a day plus minimum wage on their check. So those people that say, well, I can't afford to go to work. It's not that I don't want to go to work. It's not that I want to be greedy and collect my unemployment. I can't afford it. I'll go.
Which I would have the same reaction in that reality. I can't afford my bills on $400 a week.
Yeah. If they limit,
there aren't many people who can.
If they told you, we have a thing in New Jersey, a TIPA rate, right? So we have an agreement with the IRS. IRS comes in and runs numbers, and they say, you work in this, I work in American Cut just like Josh, but here. And they say, okay, a steakhouse. So you guys have to claim $30 an hour. Let's just arbitrary number. And if you do that every hour you work, we won't audit you. And you might make more and you might make less, but this is a pretty accurate number. Well, the IRS came out and said to tip a number, they're going to drop it 60% when we open. So they know that a waiter like myself and Josh working here in Atlantic City, our income is going to drop 60%. So if
Yeah.
we were making 1,000, we're going to make 400 now,
Right.
even when we're open, which also says, again, I can't afford to go to work making $400 a week.
Right.
And because the whole industry is closed, they can't say, we'll get another job.
Get another job.
A lot of
Right.
us run 2 jobs, you know, a bartender on a Friday and we work during the week. Well, there aren't any because every restaurant out there has, you know, a third of their crew on a waiting list, trying to get in, working one day, just doing something like that.
Yeah.
This is our headache and our problem in our industry. But I think what gets me frustrated is people on the outside that are working, making salary, and they just say, oh, well, they should. First of
Right.
all, I'm they, and that word should, exactly. It's just like everybody knows what everybody else is supposed to do.
Should
right?
do. Yeah.
The whole should, right. I think that the 450, 400, it's a good compromise, plus the 1,200 that everybody might feel like they're a winner. And everybody has to leave the bargaining table feeling like they were the ones that won, right? The Republicans have to come out and say, it's because of us that you're going to keep doing well. And the Democrats have to say the same thing. So that right in the middle, that 400, that's where I'm leaning to. That's where I'm kind of hoping, you know, I mean, they could just stonewall and on Friday say, you know what, fuck it. This is too hard. We're not negotiating. We're just fighting. And you know what? We're out. And then,
yeah, I don't think you'll see that again, though, because I again, it's an election year. And granted, not every congressman in that room is up for re-election because of the way the cycles work.
Right.
But enough of them are that I think that you're going to see.
You don't want to piss people off. I heard
Right.
an interesting statistic. Last election, 100 million people who were eligible to vote didn't.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Don't
piss
get
them
them
off?
riled up.
You want to piss them off and have them come out again? Because
and I don't know the stat.
Right?
What's that like?
If they're pissed off at Republicans, then great for the Democrats. If they're pissed off at the Democrats, then great for the Republicans. So if you can get the public to be pissed off at them, then that's better. Then that's a good thing.
And there's also, and I don't know the exact stat, so I'm not even going to throw a number out, but I saw something the other day that was the number of people who turn 18 years old this year who will be first-time eligible voters. And it was a lot bigger than I expected it to be. And that's a section of society that is politically charged right now because of the
history shows they don't vote, though.
What's that?
History shows they don't vote.
Yeah, they
but
don't.
In this moment in history, they might.
Well, they
the Black Lives Matter thing, the civics movement, all of this stuff, the Me Too movement has charged up the younger voting bloc in a way that we really haven't seen since the 1960s.
Right.
And you add on to that, hey, a lot of the jobs that I'm eligible for or that I was working, service industry, retail jobs, things like that, are decimated right now, and you're not going to help me, I'm going to vote you out of office.
Right.
I think we could see a very real young voting bloc turnout. Now, not at the same numbers that the 65-year-olds do, not even at the same numbers as the 40,
more so than
more than historically normal,
Mm-hmm.
which is generally going to skew blue and is generally going to skew progressive. And if the Republicans don't take that into account and find some deal here, they could be looking at a blue tidal wave that they just can't have right now. So I think all of that's in play. I think that there are people way smarter than me working on that right now on both sides that know you got to find a deal or else we're going to have some real issues come November. So.
And the thing that I keep saying is, too, you make a decision right now in August. We're going to have to live with this decision September, October. Josh was just talking. I mean, schools opening could be a disaster. They might. I don't think they're going to open, at least initially. If they get open, like Josh just said, 260 people in his district are sick, right? That could grow.
And that's nobody's in the schools. You got administrators and janitors. Who else are in the schools?
And then you get sports. And then you get unemployment. You know, if people don't have money, it's a perfect storm to come together for disaster.
And then, guys, what happens in October and November every year? Flu season.
Yeah.
Right.
You add ICU beds taken up by flu patients before we get this pandemic under control, and hospitalization is we're done. I mean, we're already right on the razor's edge as far as number of ICU beds available in major metropolitan areas. You add on critically ill flu patients, shut it all down again. And that's my biggest fear. My biggest fear is we start to reopen all of these restaurants. We start to reopen all of our industries. We start to get back to work. And then, bam, flu season hits us. And we're looking at a November, December, January whole shelter at home order all over the country again.
Why is one particular part of our government pushing so hard to do it? Do they really believe it's just going to magically go away?
Man, that's the $1 million question.
Come on.
I think it's just pandering to their base, personally. But
okay.
But I that's my feeling.
I also, we're seeing a lot of things today saying that if we were 85, 95% wearing masks and practicing social distancing, we could reduce these numbers drastically. You would see we'd be all the way down to like 10,000 cases a day. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't believe that masks work. A lot of people do. It needs to be. To me, it makes sense, right? If you sneeze, you cover your nose, and that's where the masks come in. Is it 100%? No. Do things get through it? No, but it probably shields a little bit. And I guess some doctors are saying that if everybody's wearing a mask, it's going to drastically reduce the numbers. And that's my worry is with you. If schools don't open and football doesn't start, my restaurant doesn't do business. That's how it comes back to me, right? And we might not open, and we might stay at 25% because Doug Peterson, who was a big deal here, football coach for the Phillies, the Eagles, right? That's personal. That's personal to all to me and to my guys, and that's touching. You find out that somebody died across the country. That's not personal. That doesn't hit me. But when it's our people, when it's our quarterbacks and our superstars, and then
wait till some of them start dying.
Right.
Then what's going to it's going to happen.
Yeah, numbers win. Right. Darwin's theory. Numbers win. If you have enough, the numbers
right.
win.
I mean, here in Atlanta, Freddie Freeman had it. Thank God, he got healthy. He came back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even mean from a sports perspective. I mean, he's a human being. Thank God he got healthy. But he ran 104.8 fever. He's an athlete in the prime of his life, early 30s,
right?
Healthy, in the best shape he's ever been in his career. And this thing made him fear for his life.
And the question is right there is how will he be 6 months from now? Will he be in the same shape, in the same, lung capacity and the same endurance that he had 6 months ago?
I always come back to that, and that is we don't know enough about this disease. I mean, it's only been with us for 8 months, and we just don't know. Like I said, I always had the inclination, I want to send my kids to school,
mm-hmm.
And that was probably, I think it's good for them, and I also think, it's good for us. But we don't know what's going to happen to children, after they get sick with it, 6, 7 months from now, 6, 7 years from now. We don't know. Is it going to do permanent damage to their lungs? In some people it might. We don't know. We just don't know.
And Josh, you and I talked about the stuff coming out about mental issues, people becoming delusional now that had it 3 weeks ago, a month ago. There's so much we still don't know. And we're not going to know for so long. And then you even have to start talking about systemic cultural changes. We already talked about the workspace and how corporate real estate is going to be affected.
Exactly.
But let's talk about cultural changes. Let's talk about, this is one disease.
Mm-hmm.
What about the next one? What if this one was one that the death rate was 10% instead of less than 2%?
Mm-hmm.
We are going to reevaluate. I think the idea that people have that there's a vaccine and then everything's just going to be normal again is short-sighted. It's probably true. It's probably what is actually going to happen.
Well, we are
people
short-sighted
go
as
back
people,
to normal.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's short-sighted, and I think ultimately, for stability's sake, for the good of economies, cultures, whatever you want to call it, we've got to reevaluate how we're doing everything. We need to talk about how school is a perfect example. We have used school in this country since the 1950s, 60s, 70s to be a daycare in so many ways because it takes two incomes to support a household now.
Right.
Well, that model kind of is being exposed as a failed model because if kids can't go to even working from home and having to do homeschool and home daycare has become such a burden on so many families that it's not really a workable model. So I don't have the answer for what we do next.
Right.
But we need to start having that conversation.
Well, Joe makes a good point, and he says, the kids should be educated on the virus. I think here's the problem. Who's going to educate them? Because half the country believes one thing about the virus and the other half thinks something else about the virus. So who decides to say, this is the facts on the virus and this is what we're going to teach? Because nobody agrees.
Well, you should listen to scientists and doctors. I mean, that's first and foremost. We don't, we listen to Fox News or MSNBC, Breitbart, and that wonderful thing they put out last week. What was it? Freedom Doctors or whatever it was.
The American doctors. Now, I can tell you that there were two ophthalmologists. There was one person not practicing. The lead doctor said some crazy things in her past, which doesn't mean that I'm not smart enough to know if what they were saying is true or not. But it in a court of law, there's reasonable doubt in their video. They don't get the conviction. If those are the people up on the stand, they do not get the conviction because there's reasonable doubt. Yeah. So that's how I look at it. You know what I mean? It's not like that. You know what else will happen? If kids are home in the fall, it will drive adults crazy. And I raised 3 daughters. It's very difficult. It will add to stress levels. We are already an angry country who's stressing about $400 or $500 a week is making us out of our mind. And then you add kids running around for a year, since March till the end of the year. It creates more anger and more stress. And like, you just want to go to Wawa and buy milk 4 times a day. You know what I mean?
Throwing fuel on a fire. Yeah. And that's what I mean.
So we have to live with these rules until Christmas, at least, if that's what they come out with. And the whole country could drastically change in the next 6 weeks. What we're looking at, we're expecting, right?
That's true.
And I think a lot of why I think you raised a great point about the angst level, the anxiety level, the all of that stuff. One of the reasons why, and I firmly believe that I've actually been arguing about policing and all of this stuff for years and years and years, feeling like I was screaming at the wind. One of my favorite books, I'm going to give a shameless plug for a minute, is called Rise of the Warrior Cop. And it talks about the Pentagon program of giving military weaponry to police departments all over the country and how we've changed policing procedures and how police have become.
Do they give it or do they sell it? I thought they
it's a gift.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a gift that is then, if you don't use it within 2 years, you have to give it back, which,
it incentivizes usage of this equipment. That's why you see tanks rolling down the street when there's shoplifting going on.
You hand a bunch of guys shiny new toys and say, but if you don't use it in 2 years, I take it back. They're going to find a reason to use it.
Right.
But anyway, I've been screaming at the wind about that for 5 years. And this has highlighted that. But one of the reasons why we came around to it societally is because we have time. We're not busy, right? If we're sheltered in place, all of a sudden we're not exhausted. We're not overworked. We're not scrambling. We're not hustling. We're not doing all of these things. We have time. And then something like the, holding your knee on some guy's neck for 8.5 minutes happens and everybody sees it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's busy or not busy anymore, and they have time to react. And on top of that, they're anxious, they're angry, they're nervous, they're scared. And this is something that can funnel all of that angst and all of that energy. And again, in a direction it needed to be funneled, but it amplifies it. And so you add on to that, to your point about being angry, being this, being that, being like having the kids in the house, all of these things. That's why I bring up, we structurally have to really rethink the way we're doing some things like education, like parenting, like what we expect a family unit to handle, and how we've used some of these institutions in ways that they weren't really designed in the original idea. I mean, when you think about schooling in this country, and you have to understand, like, schooling in this country grew out of the German pastoral model for schooling, which is where we get the word kindergarten from the German language, right? But it grew out of, you're at school in the early morning, you're out by 2, so you can get home and help the family work the farm. All right, that's an outdated, antiquated model, obviously. If I had a 12-year-old son, he's not coming to help me at work. But we adapted our schooling model to help parents be able to work later. That's why kids are at school 4, 5, 6 o'clock. You have after school programs. You have all this stuff. It wasn't so that they got more schooling hours. It was so that parents didn't have to be home with their kids.
Have a more productive society.
Yeah. So we have to really reevaluate that. And what is the value of and I'm not saying we go back to the 1950s model. Guys, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying one parent works, one parent doesn't. That's a freedom of choice thing that everybody makes their own decision. But we have to start reevaluating what's the value to society of a parent in the home more often than away.
Right.
What and I don't know the answers. That's the thing. I'm not pretending to offer
You're
answers.
just saying it's got to be a discussion that we need to have.
Yes, and it needs to be more a part of the debate than any of the other stuff about equal pay and all these all matter. But right now, this crisis has shown us how backwards we are with the way we use the systems that are in place structurally in our society, and how we really need to go back and ask 2 questions. Why do we do it this way? And how can we do it better?
Right. One of the biggest statistics on kids' success is that do they eat dinner with their family 4 nights a week at least? And the kids that sit at a table, and it doesn't matter what neighborhood you grew up in. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not. It matters if you had dinner at the table with your family 4 to 5 nights a week. And then you interview these people at the age of 30. Whoever did are vastly more successful than the people who didn't. So just family time and just a dinner, sitting home and having roasted chicken on a daily basis seems simple, but somehow it changes everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think it's indicative of, spending time with your kids, and parents that are more, hands-on parenting than necessarily the meal itself. So I understand that.
Right, but it doesn't say the kids that their dad was their baseball coach is more successful. The kids that sat down with dad at the table, not like I'm taking my dinner to the bedroom and I'm taking my dinner downstairs to play my video games. It's like everybody gathers. The one thing too with the anger, we all want to blame somebody, because I certainly don't want. It's not my fault I lost my job. I mean that literally, but I'm making a point. It's not my fault. I want to blame somebody. I'm mad as hell. I'm scared, and I want to blame somebody. So any piece of garbage I see on Facebook, I want to lash out on, even if it's true, if it's not true.
So much hatred on Facebook. I mean, some of the stuff people just copy and paste or whatever they share, and I'm like, did you even read this?
It's not.
I pointed out, did you even read this? Yeah. It doesn't even make sense.
But anyway. I saw something this morning saying something about how Europe is dealing with the virus and why they did so well with it. It had, and it was just a meme that somebody printed, and then everybody else just started sharing it. And I thought, well, there's no fact behind it. Why did Europe do better than us? I don't know. You know what I mean? But it's certainly not that meme that was saying it was something about what medicine they were using or something like that. But
yeah. So let's bring it back to the restaurant industry, because like I said, there'll be a time that COVID is not the issue it is today. And where is our industry going to be? What are we going to be doing? Are we going to lose 30, 50, 70% of the restaurants that are, currently, open or, still have structures up anyway?
I think the restaurants like the French Laundry, that are the sit-down 7-course meals, $350 for per person. I don't know if there's going to be a demand for those. And they are, and I've seen reports on them, and I've already seen that those are the first ones that aren't going to fill up. I think like the French bistro, the casual, the going out and socializing, and maybe not for $150 a head like you do in a steakhouse. The steakhouse has been king for a long time, 15, 20 years, right? And maybe the steakhouse is over. Maybe we go back to saying it's unhealthy or something. I don't know.
Michael, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I think one of the things that you're going to see is and this kind of wraps up a lot of points that Josh, you made earlier about the to-go and being able to have the experience at home and all of those things. I think people are also getting more comfortable being in their own homes, grilling their own steak on a grill. I think you're going to see a couple of different things happen. And I think you're going to see the rise of that mid-tier price point, even more so than was already happening.
Right.
You're not going to see the $150 a head, but you're going to see the expectation of that service standard at the $70 a head price point. And what that means is it's not going to be a steak. It's going to be a piece of fish. It's going to be chicken. It's going to be well executed fare that people don't feel comfortable making in their own homes. I think you're going to see a rise of more, and I know that this sounds kind of funny, but higher end ethnic foods, the rise of higher end Asian restaurants, the rise of higher end things like that, because people want that experience, but they don't want to pay for something they can make at their own home. And it's the experience restaurant. And what I mean by the experience restaurant isn't the French Laundry experience.
Right.
What I mean is the I can go there. I love the people. It's fun. I know my friends are going to be there. The regulars they're looking for their cheers.
That brings it back to service, in my opinion.
It does.
I mean, it brings it back to execution, things that we all pride ourselves on being.
But I also think the rise of the restaurant that taps into whatever their neighborhood is.
You're right about that.
Especially in urban areas.
You're right about that.
I can walk there, or it's a quick Uber ride. It's easy. I know everyone on the staff.
Yeah.
And I know half the people who are going to be there as guests every Thursday when I go.
Right.
That model, I think, is going to reign supreme.
Well, just with social media now and us being humans, we all want to be a part of something, right? We want to belong. And if we have, even I see it in the casinos because we see a lot of the same people. They feel like they're special in our restaurant. And if they feel like they're special in yours, that's a great feeling. Everybody likes to feel special no matter where they are. Right. You go to ShopRite, the lady in front of me and she tells me, I come here all the time. No shit. It's ShopRite. We're all here all the time. But just them knowing all the cashiers and being familiar, they know where all their tomato sauce is. They want to feel a part. I think that's what goes on about politics as well. You want to say something like Trump sucks, and then you want all your people to validate your opinion. Or you want to say, I love Trump, and you want all your people. You want to feel part of something. You don't want to feel by yourself, especially in isolation. So if that restaurant can do that, if you feel like, oh, yeah, I go down to Schmitty's. We're all down there every Tuesday. Schmitty's got solid business forever, you know?
Yeah.
But me and you are dinosaurs, Josh.
Yeah, it's
we're going to have to start shaking.
I didn't like the last part of this conversation.
I think there will always be room for a steakhouse style concept. But I think 5 high-end steakhouses in a city
they flooded the market.
Is going to die.
They flooded the market.
That's going to go away. And the market was already flooded. And especially like I look at where American Cut is in Atlanta, within a stone's throw, and a good throw, but a stone's throw, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 quote unquote high-end steakhouses within 2 miles. And that's not going to exist. And we've already seen places closing. I mean, not the steakhouses, but we've seen restaurants in that 2-mile radius already closed during this.
Right.
And more will come.
Well, I always say
we're not even talking about other factors such as, and you brought it up, like farming and food production, and what are going to be where are we going to be in that landscape after this is all over, or at the tail end when we're looking to, and that's going to be hard. The labor market, you're going to have to figure that out, and of course the most important thing is demand. Where's demand going to be for our industry?
Well, and you brought that up, and I want to bring something up that I think is really fascinating. And when you think about ripple effects, right?
Okay.
The farm to table model that we all love. Everybody who's a foodie, everybody who works in the industry loves the farm to table market. It is crippling some farmers right now who have these exclusive deals with restaurants.
Yeah,
okay, I farm chicken and I sell it only to you. So you can put on your menu, XYZ Farms chicken, organic, free range, blah, 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 blah. But when that restaurant stopped ordering chicken from them in March, the farmer had nowhere to sell it and contractually couldn't sell it anywhere else.
Right.
And so they start to go under. That has to get revisited. We have to let go of some control and say, look, if I want to buy your chicken, maybe I have first right of refusal. You can't sell it to anyone else if I buy X amount of volume from you.
Right.
But if I don't, then you have the right to sell it on a secondary market. The fact that we think that we got so egotistical and like, I'm your only customer, I'm the only person who's ever going to buy your chicken. When we want to reopen and that farm doesn't exist anymore, then what do we do?
Yeah.
That's an outdated, antiquated model, and it's a beautiful thing. Farm to table is a beautiful concept. But again, how were we doing it? And like, why were we doing it? Okay, the why's pretty good, but how were we doing it? It was flawed. Let's revisit that. Let's talk about that as a real problem, because what if that restaurant just drops in volume? Not even due to a pandemic, but competition opens up or new management comes out, something. And all of a sudden they're not doing the volume they were. Well, they're not going to buy the same volume of chicken. Now the farmer goes under because they're on a contract. That's not
trickle up or trickle down. I say that my thought was always that you choose a restaurant for the food and you choose to go back because how you were treated. And if people feel welcomed and they feel like they enjoyed it, and that's it. Did you feel valued? I always tell you, I make people feel like they're special, right? That's what you do. And it doesn't have to be true, right? But you just want them to know that out of all the 100 tables that are in the restaurant right now, we're taking care of you. Like, I know your name, I know what's coming out, I got your drink, and they feel like good. That's the experience. And if you're not executing there because you're trimming, you just can't afford it. You were talking about payroll in Georgia versus payroll in your company in Colorado.
Yeah. So
that makes it difficult if you just can't do it because you can't afford it. I mean, you have different reasons, but even if you're a mom and pop and you're so lean that you can't afford to give the experience, you got to cut people off the floor, then the people with money, like we were talking in the beginning, will come in and scoop up these properties and figure out how to make profit. And then they will get a guy like you and me and Josh, and they'll say, preach to these people that we want to give them the experience, but really we want to make money. Right. So we're tricking everybody into thinking we're going to hire professionals to give the experience, but we don't care about the experience. We care about money at the end of the week.
Yeah. Definitely. And I also think, and you've seen it already with the rise in minimum wages in some of these states. Mm-hmm. You've seen chefs transition to counter service restaurants a lot. I think you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see high-end food at a counter service restaurant.
Pop-up or some type of pop-up might be something very, if you can rent a restaurant one night a week, if we could all go in and take over a great spot in Atlantic City one night a week, and it cost me $3,000 to put up, right? And we can take in $10,000 in that night. Yeah. And then
do it again next week, one night a week.
Yeah. And then, you'll do it Tuesday and somebody else will do it, but we promote our Monday night, get a big gathering coming out. We do killer business. It's not the venue owner or renting a large venue, $30,000 a month is not the future business model.
I think you might even see dim sum style service pop up.
Yeah.
Almost like, look, this is a big venue. We've got 80 tables in here, and you can order from this cart, this cart, this cart, this cart, and this cart. And they're all owned by different restaurants or different chefs or different whatever. And what do you want tonight? That could pop up, to your point about just renting a space. Well, then if you all go in together, then the cost of renting the space is lower. Mm-hmm. And then you make what you make off of how good your food is, right, that you offer, and how well you sell it.
It's a festival style. Yeah, you're putting up your carts and your wagons and stuff. Yeah,
100%. I mean, there's a concept in Atlanta that's a dim sum style concept. Now, granted, it's owned by the same people and they have their chefs, but they all do different things, and people love it. Why wouldn't that translate to a dim sum style event space.
Yeah.
4 restaurants come in and they each have their cart every night, and you get to order anything you want. Sushi cart comes around, Thai cart comes around, blah, blah, blah. All of that kind of stuff. Why not?
Yeah.
And is that bad? I don't think that's necessarily bad. It's just a different model.
Everything evolves, right? Whatever people want as business model, Joe. Yeah, the food trucks are tough in Atlantic City. I don't think they're allowed like out on the street, but yeah, why not? There's a food truck inside Ocean Casino. Why not get a big space and put 5 trucks in there, indoor food trucks? That's what they do. What's final thoughts, guys? We leave anything out? Are we good?
I want everybody's prediction. I think by the end of the week, we're going to have an agreement between the Senate and the House Democrats. What do you think the number is going to be? Mike, you go first. You're the oldest.
What do I think, or what do I hope?
Let's predict.
Realistically, I'm thinking under 400, like 3.
So you're going 3 or 375?
Yeah, I'm going to just say 300. I don't think we're going to get taken care of. I think it's 300.
Okay. Mark?
I think agreement by Friday because Congress wants to go on their August break.
Oh, yeah.
I think 450.
Oh,
and I think that the 1200 is already in the bag. You're going to get a one-time 1200.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
I say 525. I think that they'll save a little face. I think they want to make it high. I think they all want to make it high. They're just pandering to the base, like you said before. Talking points, this and that, why they can't do the 600. But I think they know we need it, and I think they're going to save a little face by coming down $75. So I think 525 is what we're going to get. Well, my prediction.
I hope we're all wrong and we get to 6 again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I hope you're right, Mike. And I'm probably the most laissez-faire person in this group, but I hope you're right. I think now is the time that we need to be supporting people across industries, now's the time to be doing it. So.
Okay. Good talk, Mark. Thanks for coming on today.
Mark,
thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate it.
Josh,
hope
always
you come
good.
back and see us. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man.
I'll see you on Wednesday with Jimmy McGettigan, Josh.
Sounds great, man.
All right, man. Thanks. You guys stay there. I'm just going to turn the broadcast off.
All right.